Dad. They said I don't belong here. Lily Brooks whispered it so softly that only Daniel heard, but the words still seemed to stop the marble hallway cold. She stood clutching a wrinkled letter to her chest, its folded corner marked B. 471 in blue ink, while the interview screen behind the desk blinked once and changed her file to B. 417. Nora Vale reached up and shut the monitor off too quickly. "System refresh," she said, smiling. At the far end of the lobby, an old man in a charcoal suit stopped walking. 3 hours earlier, Daniel Brooks had parked his white work van 2 blocks from Ashcroft Academy because the visitor lot was already filled with polished SUVs, black sedans, and cars that looked too expensive to touch with dirty hands. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, rain on stone, and the motor oil that never fully left Daniel's jacket, no matter how carefully he washed it. He stepped out first, then opened the passenger door for Lily. She slid down slowly, holding the letter in both hands like it was something alive. "Don't fold it more, Daddy," she said. "Mrs. Miller said they need to read it." Daniel smiled, tired but gentle. "Then we'll keep it safe." He did not tell her he had barely slept. He did not tell her he had checked the interview time 4 times before sunrise, or that he had packed the printed confirmation in the inside pocket of his faded blue electrician's jacket beside the photo of Lily's mother. He only brushed a loose strand of hair from his daughter's cheek and straightened the collar of her old navy dress. One button was different from the others because Daniel had sewn it on himself the night before. Lily noticed him looking. "It's okay," she whispered. "Nobody will see." Daniel looked at the tall iron gates, the academy crest, the stone lions beside the entrance, and the parents walking in like they had been born knowing where to stand. Then he looked back at his daughter. "I'll see," he said, "and I think it looks brave." Inside, the lobby was bright enough to make everything feel judged. Fluorescent light touched the marble floor. A receptionist's keyboard clicked like tiny doors locking. Somewhere behind a glass wall, a printer breathed out warm paper. Daniel gave his name at the scholarship desk. Lily Brooks. 9:30 interview. Nora Vale glanced at him, then at his jacket, then at Lily's shoes. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes did not warm. "One moment," she typed quickly, too quickly. The screen above her shoulder showed Lily Brooks for half a second. Daniel saw it. Lily saw it too. Then the name vanished, replaced by another number. B. 417. Nora's hand moved to the monitor button. The screen went black. Daniel did not raise his voice. He simply reached into his pocket and unfolded the printed confirmation. "We have 9:30, he said. Nora looked at the paper as if it had arrived dirty. "Scholarship interviews are being reorganized today." Behind them, a woman in pearls leaned toward another parent and murmured, "They really should separate the scholarship families." Lily's fingers tightened around the letter until the paper wrinkled louder than her breath. Daniel felt it before he heard it, the small collapse inside his child. She leaned closer to his coat. "Dad?" she whispered, eyes lowered to the floor. "They said I don't belong here." For 1 second, the whole school seemed to tilt around that sentence. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his hand was steady when he placed it on her shoulder. He bent down until his voice was only for her. "You don't need to prove you're rich, Lily. You just need to stand straight." At the far end of the lobby, William Ashcroft, founder of the school, watched without introducing himself. His gaze moved from Daniel's work-worn hand to the wrinkled letter pressed against Lily's chest. Then he saw the corner of blue ink. B. 471. And for the first time that morning, the old man stopped looking at the child and started looking at the system that had just erased her. William Ashcroft did not step forward. Not yet. He remained near the far column beneath the framed portraits of former trustees, watching Nora Vale's hand rest a little too firmly on the dark monitor, as if the blank screen itself needed guarding. Daniel Brooks noticed the old man only for a breath, then turned back to his daughter, because Lily's shoulders had folded inward. "We're not leaving," Daniel said softly. "We're early." Nora's smile tightened. "You're no longer on the morning list." Daniel unfolded the printed confirmation again. "This says 9:30. The system says otherwise. The words were polite, but they landed like a locked door. Around them, the lobby kept moving. Heels tapping, silk coats whispering, coffee lids clicking into place. A boy in a blazer stared at Daniel's scuffed work boots until his mother gently pulled him away. Near the scholarship desk, a woman with pearl earrings lowered her voice just enough to pretend kindness. "It's wonderful they give opportunities," she said, "but they really should prepare these families for the environment." Lily heard it. Her eyes dropped to the shiny floor where her reflection looked smaller than she was. Daniel placed the printed confirmation into his jacket pocket beside the worn family photo, then crouched and retied Lily's shoelace, even though it was already tied. It gave her something normal to watch. "Breathe in," he whispered. "Slow." Margaret Collins arrived with a leather folder tucked against her ribs and a practiced warmth that never reached her eyes. "Mr. Brooks," she said, reading his name from Nora's tablet. "I understand there's some confusion." "No confusion," Daniel replied. "We came at the time we were given. Scholarship scheduling is fluid. Was an email sent? Our office follows procedure." The air between them thinned. Margaret's gaze moved over Daniel's faded blue electrician's jacket, the small grease mark near the cuff, the toolbox scar across his knuckles. "You are Lily's father, correct? The electrician?" She said it like a category, not a question. Daniel did not flinch. "Yes, ma'am." Margaret lowered her voice, shaping each word into something almost gentle. "Ashcroft Academy is a very demanding environment. Sometimes children from less traditional educational backgrounds feel overwhelmed here. We try to prevent disappointment before it becomes harm." Lily's fingers tightened around the wrinkled letter. The paper gave a soft, wounded crackle. Daniel stood, slow and steady, keeping one hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Then I hope. Kindness is one of the standards," he said. For the first time, Margaret's smile paused. Not enough for the room to notice, but enough for William Ashcroft to straighten slightly by the column. Nora glanced down at her tablet. "We can place Lily in the 3:45 slot, assuming the file clears by then." Daniel looked at the paper schedule posted beside the desk. The morning scholarship interviews were printed in neat black letters under a brass sign. Lily Brooks was not there. But Daniel saw something else. The edge of Nora's tablet still showed the file number before she locked it. B417. On Lily's letter, peeking from beneath her thumb, the blue ink read B471. Two numbers reversed. Small enough to be called nothing. Large enough to erase a child. A woman behind them shifted impatiently and bumped Lily's elbow. The letter nearly slipped. Daniel caught it before it fell, then handed it back carefully with both hands, as if returning something sacred. "We'll wait," he said. Margaret nodded, satisfied by his compliance, and gestured toward a side hallway away from the main seating. Scholarship families may use the auxiliary waiting area. The auxiliary waiting area was not a room. It was a narrow bench beside a service door, under a vent that smelled faintly of dust and floor cleaner. Lily sat with her knees together, letter pressed flat against her lap. Daniel remained standing until he noticed a young mother nearby shifting a sleeping baby from arm to arm. He stepped back and offered the bench. "Please," he said. "She can sit. We're fine." Lily looked up at him, confused by how he could be kind while being treated as if he were less. William saw that too. He saw the printed confirmation in Daniel's pocket. He saw Nora avoiding the monitor. He saw Margaret's fingers press against her folder when anyone mentioned email confirmation. Then Grace Miller entered through the glass doors, breathless, carrying an old canvas tote and looking directly for Lily. "I'm sorry," she said. "Traffic near the bridge was awful." Lily's face lifted for the first time. "Mrs. Miller." Margaret turned sharply. "And you are?" "Grace Miller, Lily's former teacher. I submitted her recommendation." Nora's hand froze over the tablet. Only for half a second. But William Ashcroft was still watching, and half a second was enough. Grace looked at Daniel's printed confirmation, then at the side hallway, then at Lily's letter. Her expression changed. "Why is she waiting back here?" Margaret smiled again, smooth as polished glass. A scheduling adjustment. Grace frowned. That's impossible. I confirmed 9:30 myself. The lobby noise seemed to pull back a little. Daniel said nothing, but his eyes moved from the letter to Nora's tablet. Grace stepped closer, and her gaze caught the blue ink at the corner of Lily's page. "Wait," she whispered. "That's not the number they just called." Grace Miller's whisper did not travel far, but it changed the air around the side hallway. Daniel saw Nora's fingers tighten around the tablet, saw Margaret's chin lift just a fraction, saw Lily pull the wrinkled letter closer as if the paper itself had become shy. "Mrs. Miller?" Lily said, small but relieved. "Did I write it wrong?" Grace softened at once. "No, sweetheart. You wrote exactly what I told you." Daniel looked down at the corner of the letter, at the blue ink marked B471, then at the dark tablet screen in Nora's hand. He did not accuse anyone. He did not even move toward the desk. He only placed the printed confirmation back into his jacket pocket, beside the faded photo of his late wife, and gently rubbed Lily's shoulder with his thumb, the way he did on nights when thunderstorms rattled the windows of their small rental house. Then the lights above the auxiliary hallway flickered. Once, twice, a thin buzzing sound crawled through the ceiling vent. A little boy near the scholarship desk startled and began to cry, clutching his mother's skirt while the adults looked around with annoyed confusion. Somewhere behind the service door, a safety chime clicked unevenly, not loud enough to be an alarm, but wrong enough for Daniel's eyes to lift. He knew that sound. Loose neutral. Old connection. Heat where there should not be heat. Margaret frowned toward the ceiling. Facilities should have handled this before visitors arrived. Nora murmured. "They're short-staffed again." The boy kept crying. Lily looked up at her father, and Daniel saw fear in her face. Not for herself this time, but for the younger child. That was the thing about Lily. Even when people made her feel small, she still noticed when someone else was scared. Daniel exhaled slowly. He turned to Margaret.
"Mom, im licensed."
"If you want, I can take a quick look until your maintenance team gets here." Margaret gave him a look that almost became a smile. "Mr. Brooks, this is not necessary." Another flicker. The chime stuttered again. The mother pulled her child closer. Daniel did not push. "Understood," he said. Then he stepped back, hands visible, quiet as ever. William Ashcroft, still near the column, watched that restraint more closely than he had watched the lights. A man trying to impress would have already opened a panel. A man trying to win an argument would have made the danger sound larger than it was. Daniel did neither. He simply waited until a young maintenance assistant hurried in, pale and embarrassed, carrying the wrong key ring and a flashlight with weak batteries. "Panels in the service alcove," the young man muttered. "But I can't get facilities on the radio." Daniel glanced at Margaret again, asking without asking. She hesitated, trapped between pride and the sound in the ceiling. "Fine," she said at last, "but only under staff supervision." Daniel nodded once. He crouched beside Lily. "Stay with Mrs. Miller. Keep your letter in both hands." Lily nodded and hugged the paper to her chest. "Daddy," she whispered, "don't get in trouble." His face changed then, just a little. Not sadness exactly. More like an old bruise remembering it was there. He thought of rent due Friday, of the van needing brakes, of the empty chair at their kitchen table where Lily's mother used to sit sorting school papers and telling him that doing the right thing counted even when nobody clapped. He touched the small wedding ring still on his finger, then stood. "I won't," he said. "I'm just going to make sure nobody gets hurt." The service alcove smelled of dust, hot plastic, and floor cleaner. Daniel opened his old toolbox, the metal hinges giving a soft squeak that sounded out of place against the academy's polished silence. He did not spread tools everywhere. He took only a screwdriver, a voltage tester, and a pair of worn gloves folded so neatly they looked almost ceremonial. The maintenance assistant held the flashlight while Daniel checked the panel. "Loose neutral," Daniel said quietly. "See the discoloration at the lug? It's been heating." The young man swallowed. "Is it bad?" It could be, but we caught it early. There was no hero in his voice, no performance. He tightened the connection, capped a frayed edge, and wiped the panel lip with a rag before closing it, so the next person would not cut a finger on the burr of metal near the hinge. In the hallway, the lights steadied. The little boy stopped crying. His mother mouthed "thank you" from across the room. Daniel only nodded, then signed the temporary service log the assistant placed on the alcove shelf. D. Brooks, loose neutral wire secured, no charge. Nora stepped in quickly, too quickly, and pulled the log toward herself as if tidying paperwork. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. That will be all. Margaret's expression returned to professional calm. Very generous, she said, in the tone people used when they meant unnecessary. Daniel closed his toolbox and went back to Lily. He did not notice William Ashcroft turning to his aide and murmuring, "Find out whether A.D. Brooks ever did electrical work for Franklin Public." He did not see the old man's eyes lower again to Lily's letter, still marked B 471 in blue ink. But Grace Miller saw enough. She watched Daniel return to the bench without asking for credit, while Nora tucked the service log under the same folder that held the changed interview list, and suddenly Grace understood that the man they were dismissing as an electrician had just signed the first document in the building that proved exactly who he was. Daniel had barely latched his toolbox when Margaret Collins began turning his kindness into a problem. "For safety reasons," she said, her voice smooth enough for the waiting parents to trust. "We'll need to document that an outside individual accessed an electrical panel during scholarship hours." The word outside seemed to settle on Daniel's jacket, on his boots, on the small grease stain near his cuff. Nora Vale held the temporary service log flat against her folder, one pale hand covering the line Daniel had just signed. Lily looked from the adults to her father. "But Daddy fixed it," she whispered. Daniel gave her the smallest shake of his head, not to silence her heart, only to protect it. "It's all right," he said. "Let them write down what they need." William Ashcroft watched from the edge of the hallway with an expression no one could read. He did not step in. Not because he believed Margaret, and not because he believed Daniel. A school founder learned early that truth without proof was just another story competing for air. And right now, on the surface, Margaret had the cleaner story. A scholarship parent had touched school property, the interview schedule had changed, and the paperwork in Nora's hands said Lily Brooks was no longer a morning applicant. Grace Miller stood beside Lily, her canvas tote hanging from one shoulder, and the muscles in her jaw tightened. "Mrs. Collins," she said, "I came because Lily's recommendation was scheduled for 9:30. I confirmed it myself." "Grace," Margaret replied warmly, using the first name like a leash. "We appreciate your dedication, but records are records." "Then show the record." The lobby softened around that sentence. Not quiet exactly, but alert. A coffee cup stopped halfway to a father's mouth. The maintenance assistant looked down at his shoes. Nora smiled and tapped her tablet. "The active file is B 417. Daniel's eyes moved once to Lily's letter. B 471. The blue ink peeked out where her thumb had rubbed the paper thin. He did not reach for it. He did not want to make the letter look like a weapon. Instead, he crouched beside his daughter and asked in a voice meant only to steady her, "May I hold it for a second, sweetheart?" Lily nodded and handed him the wrinkled page with both hands. Daniel unfolded only the corner, careful not to tear it more. He tilted it under the cool hallway light. The ink was faded at the edge, but clear. B 471. Grace inhaled. "That's the number I gave her." Nora laughed softly, the kind of laugh that asked the room to dismiss a poor child's paper before anyone looked too closely. "Children copy things wrong all the time." Lily's face reddened. "I didn't," she said, barely above a breath. Daniel did not look at Nora. He looked at Grace. "Do you have anything from the day she turned it in?" Grace's hand went into her tote immediately, then stopped as if she feared moving too fast would make them accuse her too. She pulled out her phone instead of papers. "I took a picture," she said. Lily was nervous. "I told her we'd remember the day." Margaret's smile thinned. "A personal photo is not an official document." No, Daniel said quietly. But it can show what was there. That simple sentence slowed William's gaze. Grace opened the photo. The screen reflected in her glasses. Lily, weeks earlier, standing in front of the same scholarship desk in her navy dress, holding a neat stack of pages against her chest. Daniel could see the top page. He could see the corner. He could see the blue B 471. And at the bottom of the submission basket, a small printed slip was visible. For pages received. Nora moved as if to take the phone. Grace pulled it back. Not dramatically, just enough. Why does the current file have 3 pages? She asked. Richard Hale arrived then, carrying confidence like cologne. Silver hair, donor pin, warm smile. I'm sure there's no need to turn a child's little essay into a courtroom, he said. The sentence seemed reasonable, even kind. But Daniel's head lifted. Grace had called it a recommendation. Nora had called it no letter at all. No one had said essay. William Ashcroft's eyes shifted to Richard, then to Lily's wrinkled page in Daniel's careful hands. Margaret stepped half a pace in front of the scholarship desk, blocking the dark monitor without seeming to. Mr. Hale is right. We must protect the child's privacy. Daniel folded the corner of the letter back down, slow and precise, then returned it to Lily. I agree, he said. So let's protect the truth too. The hallway held its breath, and for the first time, William Ashcroft looked not at Daniel's poverty, not at Lily's tears, but at the missing 4th page no one was supposed to know existed. The missing 4th page sat in the room like a chair no one wanted to touch. Richard Hale kept his smile, but his fingers adjusted the donor pin on his lapel twice. Margaret Collins folded her hands over her leather folder. Nora Vale looked at the tablet, then away from it, then back again, as if the glass might offer her a cleaner version of events. William Ashcroft finally moved from the column. He did not raise his voice. He only said, "Open the original submission scan." Nora blinked. Mr. Ashcroft, with respect, that requires administrative access. The lobby changed at his name. A few parents straightened. Margaret's shoulders stiffened. Richard's smile held, but the warmth drained from it. William looked at Nora. Then use it. No one laughed now. The hum of the air conditioner became suddenly clear, a low mechanical breath above the polished hallway. Nora led them to a small conference room beside the scholarship office, its glass walls frosted halfway up, its table spotless except for a bowl of untouched mints. Lily sat between Daniel and Grace, her letter folded carefully in her lap. Daniel kept his body angled slightly toward his daughter, a quiet wall without making her feel hidden. On the wall screen, Nora pulled up Lily's active file. 3 pages. Application form. Teacher recommendation summary. Household income verification. No letter. No child's voice. There, Margaret said gently, as if soothing a misunderstanding. The file is complete for review purposes. Grace leaned forward. It says 3 pages. That is the file on record. But the receipt said 4. A scanning error is possible. Daniel did not speak until Nora clicked the Properties tab. He had spent years reading service panels, timestamps on work orders, inspection stickers faded by heat, tiny differences that told him when something had been changed after the fact. He was not a computer expert. He did not pretend to be. But numbers, dates, sequence, that was the language of honest work. May I ask one question? He said. William glanced at him. Go ahead. Daniel pointed not at Nora, not at Richard, but at the lower corner of the screen. If the file was submitted at 9:14 in the morning, why does that replacement line say 7:12 p.m.? The room went still in a small, temporary way. Not the final silence. Not yet. But enough that a chair stopped scraping halfway under the table. Nora's hand froze on the mouse. Margaret took one slow breath through her nose. Richard gave a soft laugh. Digital systems update constantly, Mr. Brooks. It can be confusing if you don't work with them. Daniel nodded once, accepting the insult without taking it into his face. I work with systems that burn buildings down when people ignore small numbers. Lily looked at him then, and some of the fear left her eyes. William did not smile, but his hand lowered onto the back of a chair as if he had just decided to stay. "Show the audit trail," he said. Nora's voice thinned. "That may not be necessary for a scholarship timing issue. It is necessary because I asked." Margaret stepped in smoothly. "William, perhaps we should handle this privately. We don't want the child to feel exposed." Daniel looked at Lily before anyone else could use her as a curtain. "Sweetheart, do you want to step outside with Mrs. Miller for a minute?" Lily shook her head once, small but firm. "I want to know where my letter went." Daniel's jaw moved, but he only nodded. "Then we'll stay calm." William's eyes shifted to Daniel again. Not pity, not trust yet. Tension. Nora opened the audit trail. A line appeared, original upload, for pages received. Then another, file replaced, 7:12 p.m. authorized user, admissions_admin. Margaret quickly said, "That account is shared for routine corrections." Richard added, "Exactly. No accusation should be made from a maintenance timestamp." But the word maintenance landed strangely after Daniel's quiet repair in the hallway, and no one missed it. William turned to his aide, who had just slipped into the room with a phone in hand. "Preserve the access logs, and notify IT that no scholarship files are to be deleted, edited, or archived." Nora swallowed. It was small, barely a sound, but in that clean conference room it was loud. Daniel reached into his jacket and took out the folded receipt he had carried for weeks, creased beside the photograph of Lily's mother. He laid it on the table without sliding it toward anyone, letting the paper speak from where his hand left it. For pages received. Nora Vale's signature at the bottom. Grace covered her mouth. Lily stared at the signature, then at Nora, not angry yet, just hurt in the simple way only a child can be hurt when an adult's neat handwriting turns unsafe. Margaret whispered, "This is becoming misleading." William picked up the receipt with 2 fingers, careful not to smudge it. "No," he said, "it is becoming documented." Richard's face remained composed, but his eyes flicked once toward the scholarship office door. Daniel saw it. William saw Daniel see it. And beyond that door, somewhere inside the school's perfect system, there was now a file changed after hours, a missing 4th page, and a child's letter that someone had tried very hard to make disappear. The file changed after hours did not become an accusation right away. It became a weight. It sat between them on the conference table in the form of a folded receipt, Nora Vale's signature, and a missing 4th page no one could explain without making the room colder. William Ashcroft held the receipt under the white ceiling light, then placed it beside the audit trail printout his aide had brought in. For pages received. File replaced. 7:12 p.m. admissions_admin. Richard Hale adjusted his cuff, his donor pin catching a thin flash of light. "William," he said, careful and calm, "we should be very cautious about building a conspiracy out of a clerical correction." Daniel looked at Lily before he looked at anyone else. Her letter was back in her lap, both hands flat over it, as if she were keeping it from being taken again. "Nobody needs to call it anything yet," Daniel said. "Just don't let anybody change it again." William's gaze rested on him for one quiet second. "That," he said, "is reasonable." Nora's tablet buzzed. She turned it over too quickly. Margaret noticed and stepped closer, blocking the glass wall with her shoulder as if privacy could be created by posture alone. "Perhaps Lily should wait outside now," Margaret said. "This is becoming stressful for her." Daniel bent toward his daughter. "You want air." Lily shook her head, but her voice was small. "I don't want them to lose the letter again." Grace Miller reached over and covered Lily's hand. Not the letter, just the hand. "They won't." William turned to his aide. "Pull the last 3 years of scholarship file changes. Search for applicant codes changed after submission, page count reductions, and transfers into donor priority review." Richard's smile dimmed for the first time. "That is a broad request." "It is a precise one." The printer in the corner began to wake, clicking and warming, then spilling out sheets that smelled of hot toner. 1 page became 5. 5 became 12. The neat little conference room no longer felt polished. Felt exposed. Lines of data appeared in rows. Codes altered after hours. Income documents removed. Recommendation pages replaced. Applications shifted into donor review. Some were from last spring. Some from the year before. Some belonged to children whose family income was lower than Lily's. Grace's face changed as she recognized a name. "I taught his sister," she whispered. "He cried for a week when he didn't get called back." Daniel closed his eyes for half a breath. That was the moment anger could have taken him. It would have been easy to point, to accuse, to make Richard feel small in front of the people who had made Lily feel small. But Daniel had lived long enough to know revenge was loud and truth was patient. He opened his eyes and asked the only question that mattered. "How many kids?" No one answered at first. The air conditioner clicked off, and the silence that followed made every paper sound heavier. William's aide connected a laptop to the wall screen. "Sir," he said, voice low, "there's more." Security footage appeared from the scholarship hallway, stamped 7:08 p.m. The image was grainy but clear enough. Richard Hale entering the records room with Nora Vale behind him, both carrying folders. For minutes later, according to the audit trail, Lily's file had been replaced. Nora looked down. Margaret said, too quickly, "Committee members often review physical files after hours." Richard nodded. "Exactly. Relationship management requires flexibility." William slowly turned his head. "Relationship management?" Richard's mouth tightened, as if he had chosen the wrong polished phrase. "Donor relations. Nothing improper." The aide clicked again. A spreadsheet opened under the title Donor Priority Review. Names appeared beside pledge amounts, board connections, and adjusted applicant codes. B417 was highlighted. Not Lily's name, another child's. A donor's child. Lily stared at the screen, not understanding every column, only enough to know her place had been moved without asking her. Daniel gently angled his body between her and the wall screen. He did not cover the truth from her, only softened its edge. "Eyes on me for a second," he whispered. She did. "You didn't do anything wrong." Her lips trembled. "But they made it look like I did." Daniel swallowed. "That's why grown-ups have to fix it right." William heard that. He heard the difference between a father seeking revenge and a father demanding responsibility. He looked again at the service log his aide had quietly placed beside the other papers, the one Nora had tried to tuck away. "De Brooks, luce neutral wire secured, no charge." Then another page from Franklin Public School records appeared beneath it. Unpaid electrical repairs, 3 winters in a row, signed by the same hand. William did not say anything about it yet. He only placed that paper beside Lily's receipt, as if character and evidence had finally met on the same table. Margaret's phone buzzed. She silenced it without looking, but not before Daniel saw the preview flash across the screen. "Keep William out of the main room." Too late. William saw Daniel see it. Richard cleared his throat. "This should remain internal until we understand the context." William stood. The chair legs made a slow, final sound against the floor. Through the frosted glass, the lobby was still full of waiting parents, scholarship children, board members, and the same hallway where Lily had been told she did not belong. William picked up the wrinkled letter, but did not open it. "Not yet." "No," he said quietly. "The context is out there." William Ashcroft did not bring them back to the conference room. He brought them to the main scholarship hall, the same bright room beside the lobby where Lily Brooks had first been made to feel like an interruption. Rows of parents turned as the glass doors opened. Children in pressed uniforms sat beside mothers with pearl earrings and fathers checking watches. Daniel walked in behind Lily, one hand hovering near her shoulder, but not pushing her forward. He looked tired now, not defeated, just tired in the way good men look when they have spent all morning protecting a child from adults who know better. Margaret Collins entered first and tried to reclaim the room with her voice. "Everyone, thank you for your patience. We are conducting a brief internal review due to a clerical discrepancy." Richard Hale stood beside her, polished and calm. No child's opportunity is at risk. We simply want to avoid misinformation. Lily's hand found Daniel's sleeve. He lowered his hand over hers. We're not here to hurt anybody, he whispered. Then why are they all looking? She asked. Because sometimes truth has to walk through the room before people recognize it. William said nothing yet. He took his place at the head of the long table, beneath the Ashcroft Academy crest. His aide connected the laptop to the wall screen, but left it dark. On the table, in careful order, William placed the first 3 pieces of the morning. Lily's wrinkled letter, the printed confirmation showing 9:30 a.m., and the receipt marked 4 pages received with Nora Vale's signature at the bottom. No speeches, just paper. The room felt those papers before it understood them. Nora stood near the scholarship desk, hands folded so tightly her knuckles whitened. Margaret smiled with professional sorrow. Mr. Ashcroft, I worry this may embarrass the child. Scholarship families are often under tremendous pressure, and misunderstandings can feel personal. For a moment it worked. A few parents shifted. Someone murmured, "Poor thing." Richard stepped in smoothly. Exactly. A file number may have been copied incorrectly. A page may have scanned poorly. We should not turn a family's anxiety into a public accusation. Daniel could have answered. Grace could have answered. But William lifted one finger, and the room settled. He looked at Lily. "Miss Brooks," he said, his voice quiet enough that people had to lean in. "May I place your letter here?" Lily looked at Daniel. Daniel did not nod for her. He only squeezed her hand once, leaving the choice where it belonged. Lily swallowed. "Yes, sir." William set the letter at the center of the table, still folded. That simple permission changed something. Lily was no longer the subject of a dispute. She was a child being asked for consent by the most powerful man in the building. Richard's smile flickered. Margaret noticed and quickly pointed toward the receipt. A 4-page notation can include a blank backing sheet. That happens more often than people realize. It was clever, reasonable, the kind of explanation that gave nervous adults somewhere safe to stand. Nora nodded too quickly. Yes, the scanner sometimes counts backing sheets. The room began to loosen again. Then Daniel spoke, not loudly. Then why was the replacement made at 7:12 p.m.? The loosening stopped. William's aide touched a key, and the screen lit up with the audit trail. Original upload. For pages received. File replaced. 7:12 p.m. Authorized user. Admissions_admin. Margaret's face stayed calm, but her fingers pressed into the folder she carried. Administrative accounts are shared, she said. That proves nothing improper. Richard nodded. A routine correction after business hours. Board members often help ensure files are clean before review. It was the second time the room almost let him win. He sounded responsible, experienced, like a man protecting order from chaos. Then William's aide brought up the hallway footage but paused it before it played. A frozen image appeared. The record's room door, timestamp 7:08 p.m. Richard's posture changed by less than an inch. Daniel saw it. William saw Daniel see it. Lily, still holding Daniel's sleeve, looked at the frozen screen and whispered, "That's the hallway by the desk." It was the only thing she said, simple and true. A child recognizing the place where her paper had disappeared. Daniel bent toward her. "That's enough, sweetheart." Margaret stepped forward. "We are not going to subject a minor to surveillance interpretation." William finally turned to her. "No. We are going to subject adults to documentation." A deeper hush moved through the hall. He placed one more sheet beside the letter. Donor priority review, with B417 highlighted. Several parents leaned forward. Richard's voice lowered. "William, that list is confidential." "So was her letter," Daniel said. The words were quiet, but they struck the table harder than anger would have. Richard looked at him as if seeing him for the first time not as a work jacket, not as a scholarship father, but as a man refusing to step outside the truth. William reached for the wrinkled letter at the center of the table. "Then perhaps," he said, We should begin with the page that went missing. His thumb slid beneath the fold, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath before the paper opened. William Ashcroft opened the letter, and the sound of the paper unfolding seemed louder than the projector. The room did not move. Lily's small handwriting filled the page in uneven blue lines, careful in some places, shaky in others, and at the very bottom, untouched by any system, was the number no one could explain away. Before 71. William lowered his glasses. "Dear Scholarship Committee," he read. "My name is Lily Brooks. I am 8 years old. I am not writing because my daddy told me to. He does not know I am writing this part." Daniel's hand tightened once at his side. Lily leaned against him, her eyes fixed on the table. William continued, and his voice, though old, did not tremble. "My daddy fixes lights. Sometimes people think that means he only fixes wires. But I think he fixes rooms because when the lights work, kids stop being scared. No one coughed. No one shifted. Even the parents who had whispered earlier sat still beneath the soft buzz of the ceiling lights Daniel had steadied with his own hands. William read on. "At my old school, Franklin Public, the hallway by room 12 went dark in winter. Daddy came after work. He said no child should have to learn in the dark if someone knew how to help. He did not ask for money. He just fixed it and came home late." Daniel looked down then, not ashamed, but struck. He had never told Lily that story as anything important. He had only come home tired, washed his hands, and heated canned soup while she colored at the kitchen table. Beside the wall, Richard Hale's polished expression thinned. Margaret Collins stared at the folded donor list as if it might close itself. William turned the page slightly and read the final line. "Thank you for reading my letter. Lily Brooks, application B, 471. He stopped. The projector fan hummed. Somewhere in the back, a phone buzzed once and went unanswered. William placed the letter beside the receipt. "Show the original upload." His aide clicked. "For pages received. Show the replacement. 3 pages. Show the audit trail. File replaced. 7:12 p.m. Show the hall camera." The frozen frame moved. Richard Hale entered the records room at 7:08 p.m. with Nora Vale behind him, folders under her arm. For minutes later, the file changed. Nora's face drained of color. Richard's hand reached for his pen, missed it, and the silver pen rolled off the table, striking the floor with a sound so small it became enormous. William pointed to the donor list. "Show B 417. The screen shifted. B 417 belonged to the child of a major donor already marked for donor priority review. The room went silent then, not politely quiet, not waiting quiet, but the kind of silence that comes when people realize they have been watching cruelty dressed as procedure. Daniel did not smile. He did not look at Margaret or Richard. He looked only at Lily, whose fingers were clutching his sleeve the way they had in the hallway. "You didn't do anything wrong," he whispered. Lily breathed out, like she had been holding that breath all morning. William stood fully now. "The scholarship decisions scheduled for today are void pending independent review. Mr. Hale is suspended from all foundation duties effective immediately. Ms. Collins and Ms. Vale will surrender access to admissions records, while the board conducts a formal investigation. These files will be preserved, and if required, turned over to the proper authorities." Richard's mouth opened, but no words came. Margaret's eyes moved toward the parents, searching for sympathy, but the parents who had whispered before now looked away. William rested his hand gently on Lily's letter. "The child did not fail this school," he said. "This school failed the child." The words settled over the hall heavier than anger ever could. Daniel lowered his head, not in defeat this time, but to steady himself. Justice had entered the room, but it had not healed the wound yet. And now that everyone finally saw his daughter clearly, Daniel had to decide what kind of man he would be with that power in his hands. The crowd did not applaud right away. They simply began to move in pieces, slowly, as if the room had to remember how sound worked after the truth had taken all of it away. Parents gathered their children without meeting Daniel's eyes. Board members spoke in low, urgent tones near the glass doors. Nora Vale surrendered her tablet to William's aide with shaking hands, and Richard Hale was escorted to a side office, not by force, not by spectacle, but by the weight of documentation he could no longer outrun. Margaret Collins stood very still while her access badge was placed on the table beside the donor list. Lily watched none of it for long. Daniel had turned her gently toward him, one hand on each of her shoulders. "Look at me," he said softly. "The adults are handling the adult part now." Her eyes were wet. "Do I still get to try?" Daniel looked toward William, but William had already understood the question was not about privilege. It was about belonging. He stepped forward with Lily's original receipt, the wrinkled letter, and the corrected file. "Miss Brooks," he said, kneeling slightly so he did not tower over her. "Your application will be reviewed today under a clean process with Mrs. Miller present, and every child affected by these records will be reviewed again." Lily blinked. "Not just me." William's face softened. "Not just you." That was the first real miracle of the day. Not a check. Not a grand prize. A door being reopened for children who had never known who closed it. Grace Miller covered her mouth, tears slipping past her fingers, while Daniel looked down at the letter in William's hand. In the morning, it had been a wrinkled thing people dismissed as a child's little essay. Now it had become a witness. The blue B, 471 in the corner no longer looked like a number. It looked like a voice that had survived being erased. Later, after the emergency board session, William asked Daniel to stand with him in the main hall. Daniel looked uncomfortable beneath the academy crest, still wearing the faded electrician's jacket with the grease mark near the cuff. His toolbox sat by his boot, scuffed, dented, and quiet. William faced the remaining families and staff. "This school mistook polish for worth," he said. "And today, Mr. Brooks reminded us that character often enters through the service door because the front door is guarded by pride." Daniel lowered his eyes. Praise sat on him harder than insult. When William offered him the chance to speak, Daniel did not step to the center like a man taking victory. He stayed beside Lily. "Don't let another child get humiliated before someone checks the paperwork," he said. "That's all." No one knew what to do with a sentence that clean. It asked for responsibility, not revenge. By sunset, the first corrections had begun. The scholarship decisions were frozen. An independent audit was ordered for 3 years of files. Grace Miller was invited onto a new oversight panel with public school teachers and scholarship parents. Richard's foundation access was revoked pending investigation. Margaret and Nora were placed under formal review. There were no dramatic sirens in that moment, no shouting in the hallway, just printers running, files being preserved, signatures being witnessed, and a system finally forced to tell the truth in ink. Before they left, William asked Lily if the school might keep a copy of her letter in the scholarship office. "Not the original," Daniel said gently before anyone else could answer. "She gets to keep her voice." William nodded at once. "A copy, then, with her permission." Lily thought about it, then handed the letter to her father first. Daniel smoothed the folds with his rough fingers, the same fingers that had fixed the hallway lights, tied her shoe, and caught the page before it fell. "Okay," she said. "But can it say other kids belong too?" William's throat moved. "Yes," he said. "It can say exactly that." Outside, the evening light warmed the stone steps that had felt so cold that morning. Lily walked through the iron gate without lowering her head. Halfway down the path, she looked up at her father. "Daddy, do I belong now?" Daniel stopped. The traffic whispered beyond the trees. His old work van waited at the curb, ordinary and faithful. He knelt in front of her, his faded jacket creasing at the elbows, his wedding ring catching one small line of sunset. "You always did," he said. Lily stepped into his arms, and for a while neither of them moved. Behind them, through the tall school windows, adults continued working in quiet rooms to repair what pride had broken. And in that softer silence, the kind that comes after people finally understand, a wrinkled letter, an old toolbox, and a father's steady hand became proof that dignity does not need to shout. It only waits for the light to come back on.